Hello, this is Charles Coulomb again with The Never Ending Struggle. Different chapters in the church's history across many, many centuries and many, many strange and unpleasant situations, not unlike some of the ones we find ourselves in now. Tonight, what we're going to deal with, or rather, who, is probably the greatest and best known Catholic writer of the 20th century, J.R.R. Tolkien, and particularly his epic work, The Lord of the Rings. The most amazing thing, both to Tolkien and to those who really knew his work, was just how popular they became. In the 1960s, they were embraced by the counterculture. Uh, they spawned an enormous amount of fandom. And then, of course, as everyone knows, starting in 2000, the enormous, incredibly produced films based upon Lord of the Rings were produced by Richard Jackson. And then, of course, the less perhaps wonderful trilogy of films based on The Hobbit. And now, as all the world knows, there is a series, which I won't be talking about this evening, based on the Silmarillion, which was his posthumously published, but in time, earliest of his books. Earliest in the sense of being first created and being first in time in his mythical universe. But the Tolkien phenomenon is one that, on the surface, would seem very strange to a lot of Catholic writers today, a lot of Catholic commentators. But the more one digs into it, the more one realizes just how truly Catholic it was. And that may sound very, very strange if you're not really conversant with, shall we say, cultural Catholicism, with the folklore of Catholic peoples, with the imagination that Catholic culture has always had. For all that Lord of the Rings was a consciously written and literary work, it nevertheless drew from many, many sources in actual Catholic history, culture, and folklore. And we'll touch on those themes a little bit later. But first, we should get to know a little bit about Tolkien himself. He was, of course, born in 1892 in Bloemfontein, South Africa. His father was a banker who had gone out to Bloemfontein from England to manage the local bank. His mother, Mabel Tolkien, was a very dutiful lady, gave birth to two children, uh, Tolkien and his brother, and then went home on holiday when Tolkien was, I think, 5 years old. Uh, her husband was supposed to join them. Instead, he died in Bloemfontein. She had a very, very difficult time of it because not too terribly long after coming back to England, she converted to Catholicism, which earned her the disapproval of both her family and that of her late husband's. Fortunately for her, although lacking a great deal of help from her family, made her economic work very difficult, keeping her and the kids going. She made the acquaintance of the Birmingham Oratory. Now, an oratory, as you may or may not know, is a house of priests based upon the rule and teaching of St. Philip Neri. The first oratory is in Rome, but there are a lot of very famous ones scattered around the world. Most notably in the English-speaking world, Brompton, which was in London, which was founded by Father Faber, and in Birmingham, the one of which we speak, founded by St. John Henry Cardinal Newman. Newman had been dead a few years when Mrs. Tolkien made the acquaintance of the Oratorians there, but his spirit was certainly very strong still. And she made the acquaintance of a priest named Father Morgan. He would become very, very important both to her as a spiritual director and to her sons, because when she died, Father Morgan became their guardian. although they would both go to school and so on until each of them was 21. Father Morgan was responsible for their upbringing and their schooling and everything else. He did a very good job of it and left a very fine impression in Tolkien's mind. He went to Oxford, but then the war interrupted his studies, and off he went. He fought on the Western Front and learned a great deal about the horrors that men were capable of perpetrating on each other there. He came back. He married Edith Tolkien and proceeded to finish his degree at Oxford, taught at Leeds College, came back to Oxford and stayed there the rest of his life, rest of his professional life. But all the while that he was doing that and studying philology, the study of languages, the mythology that would become Middle-earth was percolating in his mind. And it was actually inspired by a great many things in English literature, in European history. And from time to time, he would, during the course of writing, try to link it up to established history, shall we say. But more importantly, as we'll see shortly, were the motifs he picked up from European and from Catholic history. At any rate, the Hobbit was published in the 1930s. Through the course of the 40s, he attempted to a final composition of the book. But he persevered, and so The Lord of the Rings finally hit the newsstands in the 50s. From then on, it sort of slept a little while. It acquired a few close fans, deep fanatics. But as I mentioned earlier, it would not be until it was embraced by the counterculture that it became the incredible bestseller we know today. All that time, he continued his work at Oxford, his teaching, and his quiet but intensely Catholic dealing with the world around him and the people he knew. While he was at Oxford, of course, he was a member of a small, close-knit group of friends whom we call the Inklings. They included C.S. Lewis, who he was able to help become Christian, but was unable to get to go all the way into Catholicism. There were Charles Williams, Owen Barfield, a number of other characters, and also Dorothy Sayers, who was a friend of most of them, the so-called Lady Inkling. But it was an amazing time, those 1940s and 50s at Oxford, and Tolkien was right in the thick of it. When one considers how much really good literature came out of it at that time, one could only wonder what it would have been like sitting there at the Eagle and Child in Oxford listening to all those folks reading from their various new projects. At any rate, he persevered and retired in the late 60s, I believe. He died in 1973. And he had already set a tremendous mark on English literature, on the study of language. He made several translations of classical works like Beowulf and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which are pretty standard to this day. But despite all his other work, it was dwarfed, not to say put in the shadow, by The Lord of the Rings. Despite its fantastic setting, its elves, its ents, its dwarves, and orcs, nevertheless, Tolkien himself considered it to be a very Catholic work. Unconsciously so at first, he wrote, but later more so in the revision. And as we'll see shortly, there is an awful lot of Catholic symbolism in The Lord of the Rings, if you know what you're looking for. But most important of all, The Lord of the Rings is essentially a meditation on the relationship between grace and free will. That is the secret, I think, of its popularity, the unconscious secret of its popularity. Because you see, despite the fantastic setting, the amazing characters, the strange goings on, the magic, and all the rest of it, although those are absolutely key to its success and key to its beauty, nevertheless, the operations of grace and free will in Lord of the Rings are very clearly and very starkly the way they are in the real world. And that, I think, is what people unconsciously find and unconsciously draws them to the work. There are several examples of this question of divine will, and we'll touch on them very, very shortly.
Jesus said in Matthew 26, "Stay awake and pray that you may not enter into temptation." According to St. Ephrem, Jesus, who feared nothing, experienced fear and asked to be freed from death, although he knew it was impossible. How much more must we persevere in prayer before temptation assails us, so that we may be freed when the test has come? May God grant that we may withstand temptation and carry out His will in all things.
This is a catechetical minute from Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Jesus does not reveal the Holy Spirit fully until he himself has been glorified through his death and resurrection. Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 728. God has put humanity on a need-to-know basis. Although God is eternally triune, he waited until the fullness of time to reveal his Son, and only in these last days, revealed and sent the Holy Spirit to be our helper. Holy Spirit, fill us with the love of God, and make us worthy servants of his Son, Jesus.
This has been a catechetical minute from Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. Thank you so much for your support.
And we're back. Well, as we mentioned before, it is particularly to be seen, Lord of the Rings, as a meditation on the relationship between grace and free will. This pops up several times very non-obtrusively, shall we say, if you know what you're looking for. So, for instance, when Gandalf says to Frodo, one thing is certain, Bilbo was meant to find the ring and not by its maker. that's an intimation of the divine will, you see. One can make the argument that the most realistic, in the sense of grace versus providence, the most realistic occurrence in the book is, in fact, and this is a spoiler, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know how it ends, fast forward or turn to something else. But in the end, Frodo fails the quest. It's Gollum who succeeds in it. It's Gollum who saves the world. Now, mind you, Gollum does so for his own horrible reasons, not for anything good, and doubtless he is damned. But he does save the world. And why is he there to save the world? Because Frodo showed pity, as Bilbo had earlier, showed pity on him and didn't kill him. Had he not done that earlier on, then Frodo would have failed and the world would have been taken over by Sauron. But that didn't happen. And it is the way things tend to be in life. God rides straight with crooked lines. Another example is in the appendices, where Gandalf is talking at one point about how he had come to hire Bilbo as a burglar to help the dwarves get Smaug put out of the way. He goes on a long thought about what it would have been like had Smaug not been killed, and all the terrible things that would have happened. Ending with the line, perhaps Dragonfire and Lorien, and no queen in Gondor. And then he says, but none of that came to pass because I happened to meet Thorin Oakenshield at the inn at Bree one night. A chance meeting, as we say in Middle-earth. But of course, it's precisely on such chance meetings that human history hangs. Now, when you look at Lord of the Rings, as I say, it is a very Catholic work. Tolkien thought so as much himself, as I said earlier. He wrote to a lady back in 25 October 1958. Far greater things may color the mind in dealing with the lesser things of a fairy story. So, just to give you a couple of examples of things that are in the Lord of the Rings that are very specifically Catholic, the Blessed Sacrament, and he makes the comment to a son of his son Christopher, quote, I myself am convinced by the Petrine claims, nor looking around the world does there seem much doubt which, if Christianity is true, is the true church, the temple of the Spirit, dying but living, corrupt but holy, self-reforming and re-arising. But for me, that church at which the Pope is the acknowledged head on earth has as chief claim that it is the one that has, and still does, ever defended the Blessed Sacrament and given it most honor, and put, as Christ plainly intended, in the prime place. Feed my sheep was his last charge to St. Peter, and since his words are always first to be understood literally, I suppose them to refer primarily to the bread of life. It was against this that the Western European revolt or Reformation was really launched, the blasphemous fable of the Mass, and faith/works a mere red herring, end of quote. So if you look, and he's written much else to the same degree in his letters about the Blessed Sacrament as being the center of all that's good and true and beautiful. Well, you see the Blessed Sacrament foreshadowed, since in his myth, the world of Lord of the Rings is in our world, but a long time ago, prior to the coming of Christ. You see an echo of the Blessed Sacrament in the way bread of the elves, lembas, which, again, quote, had a potency that increased as travelers relied on it alone and did not mingle it with other foods. It fed the will and it gave strength to endure. which reminds us very much of all the Eucharistic miracles, and particularly of people like St. Lidwine, St. Francis Borgia, and Teresa Neumann, who lived off only the Blessed Sacrament. Now, another place that you'll see, another area of Catholic life that you will see in Lord of the Rings, foreshadowed again in that sense of Middle Earth, that world being before ours, is the veneration of the Blessed Mary, Blessed Virgin Mary. So, as an example, he wrote to Father Robert Murray about, quote, Our Lady, upon which all my own small perception of beauty, both in majesty and simplicity, is founded. Well, the Virgin Mary is perhaps somewhat reflected by Galadriel, the Queen of Lorien, but particularly in the figure of Elbereth, the queen of the real high queen of the elves, one of the Valar, to whom the elves, well, for want of a better word, sing hymns. So, by way of comparison, this is one of the, I guess you could say, elven hymns to Elbereth. Snow white, O Lady clear, O Queen beyond the western seas, O light to us that wander here amid the world of woven trees. Gilthaniel, O Elbereth, clear are thy eyes and bright thy breath. Snow white, we sing to thee in a far land beyond the sea. O stars that in the sunless year with shining hand by her were sown, in windy fields now bright and clear we see her silver blossom blown. O Elbereth Gilthaniel, we still remember, we who dwell in this far land beneath the trees, thy starlight on the western seas. And that reminds us very, very much of the hymn by John Lingard, which Tolkien very definitely knew. Hail, Queen of Heaven, the ocean star, guide of the wanderer here below. Thrown on life's surge, we claim thy care. Save us from peril and from woe. Mother of Christ, star of the sea, pray for the wanderer, pray for me. Sojourners in this vale of tears, to thee, blessed advocate, we cry. Pity our sorrows, calm our fears, and soothe with hope our misery. Refuge in grief, star of the sea, pray for the mourner, pray for me. The amazing truth is that that kind of Catholicity really, really leaked into Tolkien's entire consciousness. And particularly, it affected his way of looking at history, which comes up again and again in Lord of the Rings. So, as an example, sends a letter to Amy Ronald, 15 December 1956. He says, quote, Actually, I'm a Christian and indeed a Roman Catholic, so that I do not expect history to be anything but a long defeat, though it contains, and in a legend may contain more clearly and movingly, some samples or glimpses of final victory. Well, I'll tell you, if you know your history, you can see how it's sort of, again, foreshadowed by what you see in Lord of the Rings. To give you one example, he gives us as a kind of ideal society the Shire. Well, it's believe it or not, the Shire reminds us very much of the economic and political ideals of the Church, as you'll see in Leo XIII and Pius XI in their encyclicals Rerum Novarum and Quadragesimo Anno. You have a traditional authority, the Fane, limited except in crisis. Popular representation by the mayor of Mickle Delving, likewise limited. And basically, subsidiarity. The hobbits of the Shire solve things very, very much on their own. All in all, I think that Bellick and Chesterton would have been very happy with the Shire. Now, of course, whether or not that's something we could accomplish anywhere else, I don't know. But it is interesting to see Tolkien's idea of what near perfection would be in a social organization. Now, interestingly enough, in the ages of faith, and this is another thing that we see reflected in Tolkien, although church and state were distinct, they were nevertheless considered to be part of the same Christian body. But that nevertheless resulted in a lot of tension sometimes between the Pope on the one hand and various emperors and kings on the other. We see that kind of reflected in the real world, if only, in Middle-earth, in the tension between Gandalf and Denethor II. Now, that may sound a bit odd, but I'll explain. Gandalf is a lot like the Pope. He's much like the papacy. He doesn't belong to any single nation, and in a sense, he's the leader of all the free and faithful. And this is because his power is based on, for want of a better word, magic, just as the Pope's is based on, well, the sacraments, rather than temporal. But Denethor, the steward of Gondor, is interested in nothing more than Gondor's well-being. So he says to Gandalf, "There is no purpose higher in the world as it now stands than the good of Gondor." To which Gandalf replies, the rule of no realm is mine, neither Gondor nor any other, great or small. But all worthy things that are in peril as the world now stands, those are my care, for I also am a steward. And you could imagine many a pope saying that to many a king in days gone by.
Here's a great way to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Do you have an old car you want to get rid of, motorcycle, RV, or boat? Simply call 855-500-7433, and when they sell that vehicle, a portion of that money comes right back to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio. It's an easy way to do it. I want to thank you for it. Call 855-500-7433. God love you and your family. Logan, what has Virgin Most Powerful Radio done for you?
Virgin Most Powerful Radio, I gotta say, I've been a listener for about a year now, and it's really helped me grow closer to my faith and the fact that I'm listening and I'm getting unsugar-coated, clear, charity with clarity Catholicism. And it's really helped me even, grow so much deeper in my faith as a young man and discern the priesthood and have a love for Jesus Christ. And this is so seen on the Terry and Jesse show on Virgin Most Powerful, the unsugar-coated, clear truth of our Catholic faith that is so lacking today. It's almost like the Terry and Jesse show. It's the orange juice Catholicism. It's filling things up. I just need to give them my shout out, my praise. I'm just so appreciative. It just really helped me, and I know people want to hear this. It inspires me to want to speak it, and it inspires me to even go as far as discerning the priesthood to think I should speak this. We need to stand up for our beautiful faith. This is the unsugar-coated beauty, and this is just what I've seen on the Terry and Jesse show. I encourage listeners to start donating and support this cause. It has just really impacted my life, and I just want to give some praise to it.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. 3871. Thank you so much for your support.
Now, although it's quite true that the struggle between Gandalf and Denethor reminds one of the struggles between different popes and kings in days gone past, it also should be remembered that in Catholic history, and especially in Catholic folklore, the memory of great kings was very, very important. King Arthur, Charlemagne, St. Ferdinand, St. Louis, these were held to be the ideal prototype for a ruler. Pious, brave, wonderful, and so on. There are three characters in Lord of the Rings who occupy the same position for the people of and elves and dwarves of that area, of that time. Elendil, Gil-galad, and Durin. And the dirges, you might say, the elegies that Tolkien writes for them, are something that could have been written for any of these real world folk. For Gil-galad was an elven king, of him the harpers sadly sing, the last whose realm was fair and free between the mountains and the sea. And then for the dwarves, the world was young, the mountains green, no stain yet on the moon was seen. No words were laid on stream or stone when Durin woke and walked alone. The world was fair, the mountains tall, in elder days before the fall of mighty kings in Novgorod, and Gondolin, who now beyond western seas have passed away. The world was fair in Durin's day. Well, you hear that yearning, that echoing in an awful lot of real medieval Catholic poetry with which Tolkien was very, very familiar. But as one knows, that medieval synthesis was destroyed by the Reformation, the Enlightenment, the French and succeeding revolutions. And those forces of modernity, if you like, Tolkien really didn't care for. And so in the Hobbit, he says of the goblins that, quote, they invented some of the machines that have since troubled our world, especially the ingenious devices for killing large numbers of people at once, for wheels and engines and explosions have always delighted them. And then, of course, the scouring of the Shire is kind of an attack on what he saw as modernity. But there's a lot more that you can pull out of Tolkien in terms of our actual history. So, for instance, the Dúnedain come to Middle-earth after the Second Age. They set up the two monarchies of Gondor and Arnor. Arnor the north, Gondor the south. By the time Lord of the Rings starts, Arnor is no longer, having broken into pieces and then been overwhelmed, although there's the memory of it and the hope that it will come again. Gondor is much smaller than it was. It's constantly under siege by forces from the south and east. Well, in a lot of ways, this is reminiscent, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, of the Roman Empire, Rome. The Western Roman Empire collapsed under the barbarians and became but a memory, which in turn would be restored by Charlemagne and the Holy Roman Empire. But the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, like Gondor, survived until finally it was, again at the time of our story, about to be overwhelmed by its southern and eastern enemies. But he does something very interesting here. And I mentioned this before on an earlier show, but it's worth remembering. He takes a very, very specific how do I put it, a very specific event, the siege of Minas Tirith, which starts out very much like the siege of Constantinople, which resulted in the end of the Byzantine Empire, the last of Eastern Rome. And his descriptions of the earlier part of the siege of Minas Tirith are very much like the siege of Constantinople in 1453. But then it flips. In 1683, the also imperial capital of Vienna was being also besieged by the Turks, but rather than falling, they were rescued literally at the 11th hour by the arrival of the Polish troops from the north under King Jan Sobieski, all unlooked for. When it looked as though the Turks would break through the walls and end the siege, they heard the bugles of the Poles, and everything changed. The siege was broken, and they were driven off. Something very similar happens in Lord of the Rings at the siege of Minas Tirith. The Poles come flying southward. Sorry, not the Poles. The Rohirrim, the people of Rohan, come south. Rohan has come, they say, in the city when they hear the bugles blowing. And the orcs, instead of the Turks, are pushed back, and the city is saved. As a result of that victory and the destruction of the ring, another interesting bit of Catholic historical imagination takes place. I'm referring here and now to the figure of Aragorn, who's a very, very interesting character. During most of their time, the Dunedain are the descendants of the Númenóreans are in the north dispossessed wanderers. And their leader, the heir to the throne of both kingdoms, Arnor and Gondor, is Aragorn. In the first part of the books, he's like any dispossessed royal prince from Catholic history. Bonnie Prince Charlie, various other figures in French, Spanish, and Portuguese history who tried unsuccessfully to regain the thrones of their fathers. But in Middle-earth, the good old cause triumphs. And so Aragorn ends up crowned king of both Gondor and Arnor. And in this, he becomes very much like Charlemagne, but a Charlemagne who's not simply king of a restored or emperor of a restored empire in the West, but one who manages to reunite both East and West into one great nation again, as though Charlemagne had somehow managed to combine the Holy Roman Empire and Byzantium. You see, Aragorn's triumph, like so much in Lord of the Rings, is a triumph that is beyond what we see in history as a rule. But going as Aragorn does from Bonnie Prince Charlie to Charlemagne, Aragorn gives us an ideal of a Catholic monarch who restores all things. There are a lot of other ways you could look at Lord of the Rings in terms of these sorts of motifs. The Dark Lord Sauron can represent modernity, but he can also, in a sense, symbolize Islam. The figure of the Dark Lord is very much like the figure of Mahound in Chesterton's poem Lepanto. It's always in Tolkien's world, the dangers to civilized Middle-earth come from the east and the south. So that was true for Europe when she was Christendom. The Mongols from the east, or the Arabs, and then the Turks from the south. Always the two dangerous areas for Christendom. The thing to bear in mind too, however, is that The Lord of the Rings is not a work to be seen in isolation. It is a Catholic work, as Tolkien wrote to Father Murray. Quote, Lord of the Rings is, of course, a fundamentally religious and Catholic work. I mentioned this earlier, unconsciously so at first, but consciously in the revision. For the religious element is absorbed into the story and the symbolism. And as you read the book, as you go through it, try to pick up on these clues yourself. Think yourself of the traditional Catholicism with which Tolkien was so imbued, and see what you can find. Reread it, but reread it with a Catholic mindset. Remember, there are all kinds of symbols that Catholics have used that he himself uses. I'll just give you one more example. Minas Tirith, the Tower of God, can be seen as a symbol of the church militant. It could be seen as the Res Publica Christiana, as it was called in the old days. As might, for instance, the gathering of the elves, the dwarves, the men, etc., at Rivendell to launch forth on the quest. Sort of a reminder of the various holy leagues in Catholic history that pulled together disparate forces to try to fend off the enemy. The Holy League of 1571, for instance, that gave us Lepanto, kind of foreshadowed. The thing is that Tolkien's work is filled with something that's particularly true in anything in Catholicism.
Hi, this is Terry Barber with Virgin Most Powerful Radio. You'll notice we're no longer advertising Amazon Smiles. It's because they're making a decision to give people $4,000 to go kill their baby through abortion. We're not going to participate in that. And I just wanted you to be aware of it. If you like what we're doing at vmpr.org, you want to make a donation to help fill in the money that we're losing from Amazon, that'd be fine. If not, that's okay too, because we're going to do it either way. Thank you very much, and may God richly bless you and your family.
We got Ernesto from Long Beach.
I just wanted to comment, and I just wanted to thank you guys. And I kind of wanted to encourage people that are listening, maybe that are not donating, because honestly, I got to be honest, I used to think you guys were a little
too over the top.
That's
right.
If God gave us a lot, and I have the blessing of listening to all this, and I just want to call all the people, I got 5 kids. I don't make a lot of money, and I'm still donating to you guys.
God bless you, brother. You're amazing.
We have to do this. We have to do the extra. And it's not even the extra. People see it like it's extra. Kneeling for communion, saying your rosary, saying the Divine Mercy Chaplet. It is not extra. It's what the church tells us to do. 29 years old, 5 kids, and I thank you guys. So everybody else, man, get on fire. Fight for the truth, man. I know what I'm telling you guys. There's
I love it
out there.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. Thank you so much for your support.
You see, what the Lord of the Rings really reflects is, in essence, the Catholic worldview. And when we say the Catholic worldview, what do we mean by that? Well, the sacramental worldview, the realization that fallen nature can be redeemed by divine grace, and that divine grace works through very physical things, specifically the sacraments. And with that, in the I think it's fair to say that the dominant note of the Catholic liturgy, for example, is an intense longing, a longing for heaven. And this is true for her art, for the Catholicism literature, for everything to do with Catholicism, a longing for things that cannot be in this world. Unearthly truth, unearthly purity, unearthly justice, unearthly beauty. And by all these earmarks, Lord of the Rings is indeed a very Catholic work, as its author believed. But in my humble opinion, it's more than that. It is this age's great Catholic epic. Like the Grail legends, the Morte d'Arthur, the Canterbury Tales. It should be really a tremendous comfort to the individual Catholic and a tribute to the enduring greatness and power of our tradition that Tolkien made this incredible work. This era has seen a complete rejection of the faith by the civilization she created. And make no mistake, the civilization we lived in is the creation of the Catholic faith. It's gone completely haywire, but nevertheless, it's still there. And it's also true, despite the loss of the faith on the part of many lay Catholics and uncertainty among our hierarchy, nevertheless, with all of that, the Lord of the Rings assures us by its existence and its message that the darkness cannot triumph forever. And you know, this very theme of holding on to the truth and the faith despite the opposition, the seemingly overwhelming opposition of the world, the flesh and the devil for that matter, is a huge note in Tolkien's work. He has a couple of quotes I would like to give you, which I think are very important. They both reflect his worldview and the orientation of Lord of the Rings. One is a letter from a letter he wrote to his son Christopher, who, alas, would lose the faith. One of the great tragedies of Tolkien's life. He says, actually, this was son Michael, I say Christopher. Out of the darkness of my life, so much frustrated, I put before you the one great thing to love on earth, the Blessed Sacrament. There you will find romance, glory, honor, fidelity, and the true way of all your loves on earth, and more than that, death. By the divine paradox, that which ends life and demands the surrender of all, and yet by the taste or foretaste of which alone can what you seek in your earthly relationships, love, faithfulness, joy, be maintained, or take on that complexion of reality, of eternal endurance, which every man's heart desires. He wrote on another occasion of the same son, the only cure for sagging or fainting faith is communion. Though always itself perfect and complete and inviolate, the Blessed Sacrament does not operate completely and once for all in any of us. Like the act of faith, it must be continuous and grow by exercise. 7 times a week is more nourishing than 7 times at intervals. And that, of course, brings us back to lembas, as we mentioned before. The other thing I would particularly like to mention comes directly from Lord of the Rings, and it's something that I think of a lot, frankly, these days. Quote, there, peeping among the cloud rack above a dark tor high up in the mountains, Sam saw a white star twinkle for a while. The beauty of it smote his heart as he looked up out of the forsaken land, and hope returned to him. For like a shaft, cold, clear and cold, the thought pierced him that in the end the shadow was only a small and passing thing. There was light and high beauty forever beyond its reach. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, that's an understanding that we need to internalize, especially today, when things do seem so dark and so hard and so difficult. When all of our leaders in church and state seem a bit confused at best, and some of them utterly criminal, we need to remember that it doesn't matter in one sense, that the beauty and truth of high heaven remains shining over us all, calling to us if we will cooperate with the graces that heaven, especially through the Blessed Sacrament, continues to shower on us. There is one other quote of his that I think is worth hearing in this context, and that has to do again with the fact that these are difficult times. It's a dilemma that we all have to face, living in a particular time that we live in. I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. End of quote. Well, Tolkien gave us a very good bit of advice. Cling to the Blessed Sacrament, cling to Our Lady, keep our eyes on heaven. Remember that God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. And in this wonderful work, The Lord of the Rings, he reminds us of all those things. He reminds us of our great Catholic history, of the many, many Catholics of all sorts, from kings to peasants, who kept the faith despite the darkest and most horrible things that hell could throw at them. And Lord knows hell threw a lot at them. As he does at us, as he does at each of us, both as a culture, as a church, and as individuals. But the darkness cannot endure forever and will not endure forever. That, ladies and gentlemen, is truly the lesson of J.R.R. Tolkien for each of us. And there is a move underway to try to get him canonized. It's in its infancy yet. Whether or not he's a saint, of course, is something that only ultimately the church can decide and miracles show. But it's a good thing to bear in mind. If you're greatly devoted to him, then you could pray for his beatification. Now, with all of that, I would simply say that whether or not he is a saint, he certainly has given us advice that can help make us saints. And now there are a couple of other things I'd like to mention for you. The first is the Spiritual Warfare Conference with Father Chad Ripperger and Bishop Strickland of Tyler, Texas. That'll be happening March 25th and 26th at St. Joseph's Church in Pomona. You can sign up for it at virginmostpowerfulradio.org. That's vmpr.org. Following this program is Night Moves. This is a Knights of Columbus show with Greg Keller and Mark Padilla, both good friends of mine, talking about the works of men and men who put faith in action. If you want to share this show on virginmostpowerfulradio.org, vmpr.org, in order to get the podcast. It's available on platforms including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Just search the Never Ending Struggle. That's the Never-Ending Struggle. You can also get other shows on Virgin Most Powerful Radio, like Jesus 911 and the Terry and Jesse Show. Again, you want to go to vmpr.org in order to get the podcast. You might also want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Full Sheen Ahead. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at VMPR Radio. That's capital V, capital M, capital P, capital R, lowercase ADIO. Get this out, ladies and gentlemen. These are wonderful tools for evangelization. If you'd like to see my own podcast, at my other podcast at Tumblr House, the YouTube channel, TUMBLAR House, Tumblr House. It's called Off the Menu, where you'll see my interlocutor, Vinnie Franchini, and myself go back and forth answering questions on history, religion, and politics that our viewers throw at us. Having said all of that, ladies and gentlemen, as Tolkien himself would have told you, however terrible the big picture may be, however powerless you may feel, remember there are still miracles, there is still truth, there is still beauty, there's still goodness. Cleave unto them. Don't let the darkness, don't let the evil triumph in your soul. Don't give in to hate or to despair. You'll find that those characters who do in Lord of the Rings don't usually end up very well, and there's definitely used as lessons. A couple of other things to bear in mind tonight before we part, ladies and gentlemen, and that is that Tolkien had seen the very, very worst that mankind had to deliver. He didn't let it embitter him. He never let it make him hate. And he could so easily have done that. He didn't. Let's strive to follow his example. As Father Faber put it, to love friend and foe in all our strife. Thanks a lot, and good night.
Saint Faustina's Prayer for Priests. O my Jesus, I beg thee on behalf of the whole Church, grant it love and the light of thy Spirit, and give power to the words of priests, so that hardened hearts might be brought to repentance and return to thee, O Lord. Lord, give us holy priests. Thou thyself maintain them in holiness. O divine and great High Priest, may the power of thy mercy accompany them everywhere, and protect them from the devil's traps and snares, which are continually being set for the souls of priests. May the power of thy mercy, O Lord, shatter and bring to naught all that might tarnish the sanctity of priests. For thou canst do all things. Amen. Virgin most powerful, pray for us.
Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.